Hi, my name's Thete. We're going to be talking about Age of Sigmar again, and this time the Hedonites of Slaanesh, the new battletome. A little bit earlier than I anticipated. I said I was going to do a video to do with points. It was not this one, but this is going to be to do with points. And it's based on a few comments with people suggesting around forums and so on that the new Hedonites of Slaanesh mortal units are overpriced. Now, what I've not been able to see when people have been saying this is on what they're basing that on. Because if you're going to be suggesting that, there needs to be some mathematical treatments done. And it included a comment on my own Hedonites of Slaanesh battletome review as well, albeit I would not expect anyone to explain in detail in a YouTube comment. If you write a wall of text, no one reads it. But on forums, you might expect someone to have laid out why they think it's overpointed, not really seen it. So what I've done is I've done my own mathematical treatment. Now, this is sort of something I do in general when I'm trying to work out army lists. And it's not the be all and end all. It basically comes up with a value for units in terms of their damage potential. So it works very well for units that only have damage potential because, you know, there can be some empirical thinking with certain features, like, for example, their movement or the number of wounds they have, or special abilities for buffing, something like that. It's very difficult to calculate a points value for it. So what you really need to do is to use this to compare units that have as few of those as possible. So what I do, it's quite simple. And Age of Sigmar lends itself to this because unlike in 40k, for example, most of your rolls don't really depend on what you're attacking. The save roll from your opponent does. So you hit and it's just based on your hit. You wound, it's just based on your wound and so on. So what I do is for each weapon that a unit is going to be attacking with, I put down the number of attacks they have, their chance to hit, their chance to wound. Now, in terms of the chance to save, I always assume they're going against a decent beefy target. So I give the target unit a 4-up save. Can't say fairer than that. So that factors into their rend, and then the damage for each one. And then you can work out how much damage they might expect to do in a round of combat or a round of shooting, because I do it for missile weapons as well. And then what I do is I work out a value in terms of, based on the points cost of the minimum sized unit, what is the value of that unit. And it's the lower the number, the better, because what I actually do is the formula I use is the points value of the unit divided by, and it's the damage they will do in shooting plus double the damage they'll do in melee. And the reason I weight melee that way is simply this, that if you're in close combat, you can have 2 rounds of combat, a battle round, because you can then go in your turn and your opponent's turn, but in shooting you can only go in your own turn. Now obviously, as I say, this isn't, even for purely damage, isn't always straightforward, because if you have a lower save or lower wounds, then more quickly you'll lose some of those attacks if your opponent's unit goes first and all the rest of it. But, it's a mathematical treatment. It works as well as anything else you can do in the same scenario. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all show you some units that people will accept as decent units. Starting off actually with the Hedonites of Slaanesh, the previous battletome, with Demonettes and Hellstriders with Claw Spears, both of which were battle line in a Slaanesh army, and both of which were taken because, they were good units for them. Bear in mind, the old Hedonites of Slaanesh, you would largely just take battle line units. You might take some Fiends, Fiends were good, but generally you would largely just take battle line units because you'd want to get as many heroes in as you could. That arguably, the heroes are still going to be good choices, but that may not be quite so the same extent. So what you can see is I've worked out for Hellstriders. Now bear in mind in terms of the notes, I didn't include their kill bonus. So what happens with the old Hellstriders, they've changed a bit, is if they kill any models in a round of combat, then for the next round of combat they get a bit of a boost. So I haven't included that in, but then there's other ones I haven't included as well, which is where sometimes you need a bit of empirical thinking. And their value, or efficiency as you might call it, comes out as 12, which is quite good. Remember, the lower the better. Round about 12 is decent. So when I've done this with armies in general, I've done this with quite a lot of armies when I've worked out lists, that is pretty decent. Also, I will say, when I use this to work out which units to take in armies and things like that, I do always do a version where I include bonuses from either charging or whatever else they've done, just to see how much it changes it. But for this, we're just doing a mathematical treatment. For demonettes, 10 demonettes, 13. So they're both, 12 and 13, that's both reasonable. That is quite decent. Then new Daughters of Cain units. So again, they're regarded as absolutely fine. Some have changed a little bit. You can see for Blood Sisters, a combined points efficiency of 8. So that's really good. If it gets into single figures, it's really good. There are some units dotted about, not that many. I will also point out again, and this is where we need to sometimes moderate it with some empirical thinking. Bearing in mind, one way in which Blood Sisters changed is their turn to stone used to be an attack, which meant, if you were attacking first with them, they would get that attack in. Now, although it's better, it's a 3-up instead of a 4-up, it's done at the end of combat, which brings it into line with, I suppose, a few other things. But it's done at the end, so they are going to get a smack in the face first, which means that 1 or 2 of them may have died, and you may not get as many. But again, idealised circumstances. But that factors heavily in there. So in reality, you might think that it's not quite as good as 8, but they're still very good. Blood Sisters are excellent. Blood Stalkers come with 18. Now, because they're range will always not do as well here in terms of the points. And you'd think, well, your system then seems to think you shouldn't really take range units. No, of course you take range units because you benefit. Again, empirical thinking. You benefit with range units is you can plonk them on an objective, and they can still contribute a bit of a distance away, particularly if the range is good. If the range is only like something like Scryer Acolytes, it's not that great. You do need to get them up the board. But something like an 18-inch range bow, yeah, that's fine. You can do that from a bit of a distance. And it stops your opponent swooping in with a small commando unit and nicking that objective. But you would expect range ones to not come out as well. 10 Witch Elves, 7, and I have included in that the buff from having a hero and the blood shield, because if I've got a unit of Witch Elves, I'm going to have a Cauldron of Blood next to them. So I've taken the view that if I were to take a unit of Witch Elves, I would have a Cauldron of Blood there. So they would get the blood shield and they would get the hero buff. So I've factored that in. 10 Sisters of Slaughter, again, the same thing. I would assume they'd be next to a Cauldron of Blood. And I always give mine bucklers. So they come out as 17. So that's not so good. Even if I'd have given them the full combat prowess, because bear in mind, these points don't take into account the fact that I've given them a bit of beefy defense or beefier defense. And of course, it can do some mortal wounds back in the face. That's not going to get down to the same value as Witch Elves. Witch Elves are just better. The main thing with Sisters of Slaughters, of course, is that they can pile in and get into combat from 6 inches away. That's the really useful feature of them. And then in terms of a couple of other ones, so Putrid Blight Kings, for example, a really good unit for Maggotkin of Nurgle. They come out as a value of 13. Blood Knights for Soul Blight, or just Legions of Nagash in general, but for Soul Blight they are battle line, and they are 15. So but again, the extra range, and they're quite well defended. They've got 3 wounds each, and so for your 180 points you get 15 wounds worth of stuff. 4-up save, can be a 3-up save against no rend. So, again, you factor things like that in. They're more likely to get a charge in. And on the charge, the Blood Knights do get a beefier bonus. They're likely to do on average twice as much damage. So you could say on a charge that had come out at like 7 or 8. So Blood Knights are actually really good as well. So then if we compare, so that's where we're looking at. So for melee units, we're looking at round about 12-ish. Would be decent, and less than that would be really good. And for ranged units, I've only looked at Bloodstalkers, but Bloodstalkers are decent, around about 18 there. So now if we look at the new Hedonites of Slaanesh mortal units. So Bliss Barb Seekers with bow, 5 Bliss Barb Seekers with bow is coming out at a value of 18. So that's the same as Bloodstalkers. So if you think Bloodstalkers are decent for the points, then Bliss Barb Seekers arguably are even better, because if you compare then the softer stat side to them, they've got a 14-inch movement, 4 wounds each, And they cost 180 points, so it's a bit more, but you get way more wounds for that because you are going to have 20 wounds in that unit, whereas what your Blood Stalkers are going to have 10 wounds. And they've only got a save of 5 up, but that's the same as the Blood Stalkers. So point for point, and you don't always work it out like this because, one unit might be more valuable to a particular army than another army, depending on allegiance abilities and what else they've got and all the rest of it. But Bliss Barb Seekers are really useful. If you think Stalkers are useful, they are. The other thing, bear in mind, if you're looking at the attacks on here and thinking, why is the attack so weird? It's because initially I forgot to add in the Euphoric Killers. So I folded that into the attacks because it was easier at that point now that I'd done it. So then Slick Blade Seekers. So these are the ones that are just pure melee. And they come out at a value of 10. They're really good. They're really good. They are not overpointed at all. They're not battle line. That's the downside when I'm comparing to a lot of these things. A lot of these things are battle line. In fact, this is the first one I've mentioned so far that is not under any circumstances, but it isn't battle line. It's not battle line under any conditions. So that counts against them because, again, if you were minded to do what Hedonites of Slaanesh would have traditionally done in the past and take as many heroes as possible, you largely just want to take battle line. Well, these will not feature. However, they are good. Then the Myrmidesh Painbringers. These are battle line if you've got a Lord of Pain General. And of course, it's a very sensible thing to take a Lord of Pain if you're going to take these units anyway. Why not make it your general? So they come out as a value of 14. So not necessarily amazing. However, again, when you consider they've got a decent movement of 6, but they've got 2 wounds and a 4-up save. So things like that can help out enormously. So, they're not bad. I don't think you could look at this and go, they're overpointed. Because at 40, again, I usually say around about 12 is good. If I'm going to take it, usually for an army, I can find units, combat units, that'll come out as a value of 12. So, Sick Blade Seekers, for example, definitely. But for a block of infantry that's fairly hardy, because 4-up save and 2 wounds each, 14, they're not bad at all. Simbaresh Twin Souls, they're even better because they come out as a value of 9. That's objectively much better. So I'd certainly be taking those. And they're battle line if you take a Lord of Pain as well. The Bliss Barb Archers with bow come out at 18 again. So we're consistently getting a value of about 18, which again, if we say the Blood Stalkers are okay for 18, these are as well. They are battle line in a Slaanesh army, so you don't even need a particular type of general. Useful, stick 22 of those, which is 20 archers on your objective, or even 10. And they'll be able to plink off a few shots, as well as, they're pretty decent with that, as well as hold that objective, because they're not going to disappear too quickly either. They got 1 wound each, of course. Then Slangor Fiend Bloods come out as a value of 14. So again, a little over, and that does factor in the extra damage they'll do at the end of the combat, a little bit like Blood Sisters. But again, good movement, and 3 wounds each. But, maybe you look at those and you think, they're not bad. Again, I wouldn't say overpointed. And then, actually, if you were going to say maybe something is overpointed now, the Hellstriders with Claw Spear. Now, again, I haven't included the charge bonus, but I didn't include the charge bonus for the Slangor either, who might be a little bit better than that 14 with it. But Hellstriders with Claw Spear, which works a little differently now. It now gets a charge bonus rather than a bonus for the next round of combat, which is better. It's got a 14-inch movement. If it wants to charge something, it'll charge something. So that actually does make it better. I almost was tempted to put the charge bonus in, thinking to myself, if this thing gets into combat, it will be because it's charged. Not much is going to charge against that. But, I was consistent there. So it would come down a bit from 17, but it won't be the 12 that it was before. It was much, lower points before, although I would argue it's better now. But yeah, it's a little bit out of there. So you might argue maybe it's a little bit overpointed there. Again, just purely using my thing here. But again, bear in mind that 14-inch movement is absolutely crucial. And they are, of course, still battle line. Because obviously, if I were looking at Hellstriders with the Claw Spear, and looking at Sick Blade Seekers, well, there's no contest. You take the Sick Blade Seekers, same movement, not as good at armour because Hellstriders do have a 4-up save. The Sick Blade Seekers just have a 5-up, but they've got 4 wounds. You know, it's like they've got twice as many wounds, the Sick Blade Seekers. They do cost more points, of course, but you know, for the damage you're going to get out from them, they are amazing. If they were battle line, there'd be no arguments at all. The fact that they're not battle line means, you know, they're 200 points for 5. It's like, well, if I want to take a load of heroes, particularly a couple of greater keepers of secrets, like greater demons, keepers of secrets, or Hellbanes, Shalaxi Hellbane or something like that, maybe I'm going to struggle to squeeze in those 200 points for something that's not even battle line, but it would arguably be worth it. And then you could look at it, well, the Simbaresh Twin Souls, for example, worth 9 points, or value of 9 points, efficiency of 9 points, they're really good. But of course, 8-inch movement is not bad, it's very good for infantry, but it's not 14 inches, so you wouldn't always, you know, guarantee which combats you get into with those. But that's what I would say on that. You look at that and you think, you can't really say that they're overpointed. And obviously I've not done a treatment on the characters or anything like that because that gets more complicated. But yeah, someone's going to have to, for me, come up with a mathematical treatment, a valid mathematical treatment that says, look, these are clearly overpointed compared to, and I haven't compared it to rubbish units in other armies, I've compared it to good units, units that are taken in competitive lists with other armies, and also combat orientated ones as well. So I've not compared it with ones like Plague Bearers, which would also be taken in a competitive list, but their job is just to not die. You know, I've compared it with other ones that would do a similar job. And they look all right. They look all right. Maybe people just looked at the points and go, that's ridiculous, and have not really appreciated just how much damage they can do and how much mobility they have. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Until next time, I'll see you later.